McConnell in the most like fun house mirror bizarro world moment of the week, like minutes after the vote to acquit happened, and he voted to acquit, even though he said maybe he wouldn't before, said this on the Senate floor.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. And having that belief was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth.
That was almost verbatim what House managers said.
Brave,
it was one of those moments when I had to like look at my notes when I was like doing the votes, and I was like, "Wait, he voted to acquit, right?" Because like the speech didn't match at all with it. Yeah. And you know, there are a couple things that a lot of people have pointed out. People have pointed out. First of all, the constitutionality of the trial was voted on by the Senate, right? Whether you agreed with it or not, the body that you're a part of decided that it was constitutional, right? And so the leaning on whether or not it was constitutional after the vote was done and you lost, it was interesting. And most importantly, he was the guy when this happened and right after the House voted to impeach that could have started the trial immediately. That was on him. He could have made that decision when he was majority leader. Would it have finished? I don't know. We got 5 days in, so it could have, right? It could have happened. We were running right into the inauguration of Joe Biden. But the idea that if anyone, I don't know who, but if anyone could have done this before Joe Biden was president, we should have done it. And it was like, but you could have done that.
But isn't that part of when he did that? It was like we all knew there was some sort of Machiavellian reason in Mitch McConnell's, like whatever waddle that he was, that drives him. And so that's how that quote continues, right? Is that he says, but it was actually unconstitutional, which is ridiculous in a lot of ways, because like what you just said never really like dawned on me until the way you framed it, which was like, look, the body you represent, the body you're part of, voted and said it was constitutional. Yeah. So then what? You can't just go back on the way you personally voted. You have to represent that body. That body represents the American people. Then your job is to be an impartial juror. You can't go back to that first vote. I mean, that's a really interesting point. And it's talk about putting country over party.
That's what happened with Senator Burr, right? Like he voted that it was unconstitutional, but then he lost. And so he said this in interviews afterward. He said, well, I lost. And so now I had to look at it based on the facts that were before us. And also the Congressional Research Service, which is like a nonpartisan organization that looks at different rules like this. Most of the constitutional experts said that this was constitutional, that you could do this, right? Yeah. And so, the leaning on something that is it was like a very small number of people who were saying out of the Senate who were saying that it wasn't constitutional. And so leaning on that is, how history looks at that is going to be fascinating.
I mean, how history looks at a lot of this shit. I mean, where do you think, first of all, like beyond what his duty was or whatever, what do you think this means for Republicans? You're up in there, you're in DC, and you see the changing of the guards, out with the tacky Trumpers and in with a little less tacky Biden folk. But like, how do you, what is the word on the street in the back halls as to what this means for the Republican Party? Lindsey Graham today just said Lara Trump is the future of the Republican Party. Nikki Haley, who came out and finally said that Trump went a bridge too far and that actually, provoking an attack on the Capitol was bad. Slow clap for Nikki Haley. They're having a moment here.
Yeah, if that Nikki Haley story. So my colleague Tim Alberta did a long piece. It's very long, you guys, but it's worth it if you're trying to get into the minds of people who were dealing with this as it happened. He talked to her over the last couple of months. But the Republican Party is, and I hate this term because it makes me think of like songs, like at a crossroads, right? Like it's like that Bones, Thugs and Harmony song. Yeah. And so it's not as fun as the song, but they really are, right? Like you have. After January 6th, there was a moment, there were a few moments where the Republican Party was ready to turn their back on President Trump, right? They were ready to move on. They said he had done too much. Mitch McConnell, in his speech then, said like, this is ridiculous. President Trump has something to do with this. Kevin McCarthy ended up saying the same thing. But as the week started going on, everyone started going back in their corners, right? And Republicans, you had this larger wing of the Republican Party that they're scared about what's going to happen. President Trump and his family and his allies have been promising to primary every single person, right? Like it's this idea of revenge in 2022 and whatever year they're up for re-election in the House and the Senate. And they are terrified of that. They are scared. And when you talk to some of the Republicans, especially the ones who voted to impeach in the House, they talked about needing security. They talked about like the death threats that they're getting. That does not make other people get brave, right? Like when you hear about someone who did something contrary to the leader of your party getting death threats, that doesn't get you excited to do the same thing. And so they're making all these different political calculations, electoral calculations, personal safety calculations, which is kind of wild to think about, right? You have the leader of their party who is not saying to his people, do not do this to people. Don't make these threats. Don't tell people you're going to hurt them because they voted to impeach me, right? He kind of revels in this revenge, and he has this PAC that has raised tens of millions of dollars, and he's going to use that money and travel around the country during the primary season, primarying all types of people. Those seven people that voted to convict, the ones that are up, and whenever they're up, they're probably going to get the same thing. And those 10 in the House, you should be sure that they're going to get a primary from further on the right. And so the Republican Party is dealing with, how do you deal with a president this hasn't happened before. No other president's kind of like been hanging around, kind of owning the party, right? They just go do their library or whatever. But President Trump has promised to come back and run in 2024. And so how can they do anything but do what he says? Because for the last 4 years, Republicans, if you said anything against President Trump in the Republican Party, it was like, you're disloyal, you have to go, you can't be in the party. So how do you run a primary if he's in it? How do you even think about Nikki Haley, for Ted Cruz, for Marco Rubio, who wants to run for president again? How do they even do it, right? How can you even do it if President Trump says he's going to run? Yeah,
I mean, they're cowards. They're cowards, and they're cowards for two reasons. One, they have no moral center. They're cowards, but they're cowards because they're literally scared for their lives. I mean, I've said this on the damage report tomorrow morning, but I'll say it again, that like, it is only a matter of time as a Republican before it is hang, insert your name, hang Mike Pence, hang blank, hang there's no amount of sycophantism or tree or whatever the suffix of that is.
Yeah. I mean,
before your name, and you're the one everyone's going to call for, because if you step out of line at all, with this insane, dumb Hitler, right? This stupid Nazi, then like they're gonna try and primary you. I have different thoughts about whether that could win, like whether or not truly Trump cares about anyone besides himself. Or even his family. He doesn't give a fuck about his family. But Matt, do you want to step in?
Well, they could have, if they're worried about Trump running in 2024, they could have fucking convicted him and impeached his ass, like convicted him in the impeachment.
Disqualify him from
running again. And here's the thing.
It seemed like a perfect solution for them.
It seems like a perfect solution. I don't understand it. And you could say, sure, well, they're still worried about their jobs, about being primaried. It's a shitty job. Just go to the private sector. Like, these guys are acting like money isn't all they care about. And yeah, sure, they care about power and they care about looking good at the cafeteria in the Capitol or whatever, wherever these, slugs hang out. But like, But I just, to me, like, I will never understand. I don't think ever will understand people's insistence that that them losing an election is somehow this like career-ending injury. Like, okay, so you get primaried. Big fucking deal. Write a book.
Stand up for but also stand up for yourself. If you get primaried, then there are a few representatives in Congress, Republican representatives, who are trying to carve a line out, trying to articulate something different. Have you become a patron yet? Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room is where you can directly support this show and help me make it sustainable so that I can do more of what I do best. Doing this.